The second point we had for discussion was asking people which services they would like us to focus on next. Well, as this is a screencast, you're not going to get that option, unfortunately, but we'll just move through the next parts of the presentation before we finish. So we had Your Money and Serveis Lingüístics de Barcelona. Additional services that you can buy or use, I'll explain that a bit more later, in addition to the basic services covered by your €20 a month. The solidarity and volunteering aspect of the cooperative, we did mention that we like to be inclusive and to have opportunities for people on low incomes and unemployed to work with us, and I'll talk about that a bit in a moment. And finally, our future goals. So if we move back to the first point there, additional services, we'll just run through a few possible services that we can provide. Transport, for example, the job I'm doing out in the port of Barcelona it's impossible to arrive at the company on public transport. So we have a deal with Motit, which is a company that rents out electric scooters, and ironically I'm travelling to a petrol company on an electric scooter. But this is just one example of how a cooperative can get services for its members a little bit cheaper than that member could get him or herself. Gestoria, in other words, legal financial advice. We mentioned the basic services that Irene offers in her department. Irene could further offer you as an autonomo or freelancer services, of gestoria, which in Spain really means billing clients, filling in tax returns, etc. Irene can do that for you within the cooperative, and we're also able to employ an outside gestor if the cooperative expands to such a point that we would need to. Again, the aim being to provide those services for cheaper than a freelancer would normally have to pay as an individual. We have classroom and co-working spaces available for larger groups. So what we aim to do via the website promotion aspect or the agency aspect is allow students to form small groups at the moment of up to 4, but hopefully later we can expand on that. And we will provide you with a classroom space in which to conduct these classes. We are not a billing cooperative, which is to say we are not a cooperative which allows non-freelancers to bill anyone for work they do outside of a kind of contracted job. But within the law and the jurisprudence that dictates what we can and can't do, we certainly can allow a limited billing facility for non-autonomo members. We may also be able to provide legal representation should it be required. More specialised training, professional development depending on the needs of members. We also promote the exchange of services between members, which can take place in a variety of ways. It could be simply one service exchange for another. At the moment I am exchanging English classes with Irene in exchange for her doing my books and accounts as a freelancer. We are also part of the Eco Xarxa. The Eco is an alternative currency, which is a currency which is supposed to be free of speculation, inflation, etc., which allows users of the Eco Xarxa to exchange services in exchange for payment in ecos, and those ecos can then be spent on other services. So at the moment we've got a class running where a private student is paying us in ecos, and we hope to build up a fair bank of ecos that we can then use to pay for certain other services for the cooperative. Furthermore, we have a time bank idea which I'll explain a bit further when we look at Your Money and the cooperative. All of this is to say that working together you can achieve more than you could working by yourself, as this picture illustrates, and also this video. Now, the killer whale in that clip can represent whatever you want it to represent, whether it's the ELT industry itself, middlemen, the taxman, whatever you feel is stopping you fulfill your professional or economic potential as a language professional. What we are hoping to do is just to tip the iceberg a little bit more in our favour. Finally, just about services, whatever members would like, we will do our best to get it for them, and that's a simple philosophy of the cooperative. And one of your rights as a member is to acquire goods and services to help fulfil the objectives that we stated before. Now, moving on to your money and the cooperative. The first thing to mention, we already did talk about the obligatory minimum investment of €200. It's also possible to make additional voluntary investments. All the founding members, the 4 of us that we introduced at the start, have made a voluntary investment to help pay for the website. But voluntary means voluntary, and no member is in any way obliged to make such a contribution, but they would only do so if they maybe wanted to achieve something specific within the cooperative, needed a bit of additional investment. Based on the work done by cooperative members toward meeting our objectives, the profits that we make at the end of the year can be divided up and redistributed back to the members. This year we were looking to break even, which we're very happy about, and we're hoping to be in profit by the end of the next financial year. When I say your share of these profits would be determined by work done towards meeting co-op objectives, just to clarify, work done for external clients would not count for this. We feel that our teachers are paid and paid well for working with external clients. What we're talking about is work contributing to the services we provide, whether that's adding materials to the resource bank, doing some training sessions, doing some admin with Irene. Some of that work can be paid, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But the system that we have in mind for this is to use a time bank. Now, the principle of a time bank is similar to the echo currency I mentioned before, but rather than represent a currency, we deal with hours, and we regard in the cooperative any hour of work done towards meeting our objectives is valued the same as any other hour of work done. So an hour of training, for example, would be regarded the same as an hour of administration. We will have a minimum number of hours that all members are obliged to input into our programme of services every year. Once members go beyond those minimum hours, they can exchange hours for other services with the same time value. And that's similar to the concept of service sharing that I mentioned before. But the accumulated hours at the end of a year are used to calculate what share of the profits the member will get, and therefore we hope this is a fair way of rewarding the efforts put into developing our services. Members equally can vote to retain the profit within the cooperative, adding value to the share of each member. I mentioned before that we have a training fund that has to come off our profits at the end of each year. 10% of our profits need to go to the training fund before we can do anything else with them. Also, 30% will go to an obligatory reserve fund, which is to say that year on year, as the cooperative grows in terms of profit, our sort of social capital will also grow with that, giving us a kind of more stability going forward. Equally, you can earn money, of course, from cooperative activity. Ideally, we'd like to pay for every piece of work done developing our services. At the moment, though, we envisage that some of these will be rewarded in terms of hours in the time bank, and other things that can be paid directly. For example, any administration done for paying clients would, of course, be paid. Training sessions, for example, would be paid as well. Other things like contributing to the resource library, we see that at the moment as not being a paid activity, but something which could have a financial reward in the future in terms of materials being published. And of course, if any member were to leave the cooperative, they would recuperate their initial investment, plus or minus any profits or losses that had accrued in the time that they were with us. But it is not too easy to leave the cooperative. You have to have a valid reason, as stipulated in our statutes. For example, a major change in circumstances, leaving the city, changing profession, etc. would be regarded as valid reasons. But the statutes are designed to discourage short-termism. And just to give you an assurance that the 4 of us founding members are committed to this project for at least the next 5 years, and certainly we hope beyond that. So, we want people to commit to the cooperative who are looking at it as a long-term investment. Now, moving on to the solidarity and volunteering aspect of the work that we do. This takes several forms. At the moment, we are mounting a fair pay campaign in collaboration with some other organisations. That is to say, we feel that teachers in our industry, at times translators as well, are underpaid, and unfortunately there's a tendency for teachers to undercut each other when it comes to the private student market. We aim to discourage that as much as possible. We took a survey of Barcelona teachers, as I mentioned before, last year, and George is currently conducting the same survey on an international basis, so we can get a bigger picture of pay and conditions for teachers globally, and also the kind of aspirational rates that they feel they should be earning. Also to examine discrimination against non-native speaker teachers, which is a major issue which has come to light more strongly recently. How do we actually implement our fair pay campaign? There are various ways, but we've decided against naming and shaming those institutions that we feel pay poorly. We would rather reward the institutions that do pay well and have good conditions for their staff. So we're looking to provide validation for language academies, schools, other institutions that meet our criteria in terms of pay and conditions. Those institutions would then be able to advertise for staff on our website. In general, though, we really aim to practice what we preach. We've mentioned our minimum pricing, etc. We aim to pay our teachers and other language professionals as fairly and as competitively as possible. Many of our members are very much interested in volunteering and putting something back into the community. As we know, Spain is suffering a prolonged and debilitating crisis, and we feel as a cooperative that we would like to do our best to help people gain the skills to get back into work. And as such, we are looking to collaborate with a couple of local organisations who run back to work programs for the unemployed. We will be providing teachers for those programs. We've also been working further afield in this respect. These are some kids in Guatemala. Irene and I went to Guatemala earlier this year to do some teacher training and classroom assistance for the Phoenix Project schools. Phoenix Projects run schools across Latin America for children in quite impoverished environments who often don't get adequate access to education or to quality education. And they employ local teachers to run the schools, and the project has been extremely successful. We were delighted to go in and help a little bit with the English program for the children. Here are, in fact, the teachers from the school in San Andres Itzapa in Guatemala, and we were able to make a good healthy donation to the funds which help pay these teachers' salaries, and they're doing an excellent job. And also to reiterate that when students or clients try to book a teacher through our website, they have the option, if they're on a low income or unemployed in fact, to contact us for a more flexible rate that we would negotiate between the client and the teacher. Where possible, we would place that student, if they were on a low income or unemployed, in a free class run by one of the organisations we are working with. And to finish off our future goals, one of our main objectives at the moment is simply to increase our membership, and this is partly the purpose of this presentation. We feel that the more of the right people that we have, the better the services we can offer, and the greater the range of those services. As I've mentioned before, we are very keen to publish the best materials and courses that our members have put into the resource library, and that's one way that those members can earn money on the work that they've done. Through all this, we aim to establish the name Serveis Lingüístics de Barcelona as a byword for quality language services. And obviously the greater the reputation that we have as a cooperative, the better it is for our members, and the easier it is for us to meet our objectives. Another ambition beyond that is to have our own co-working space. I talked before about our ability to access classroom spaces in co-workings in Barcelona, co-workings being shared office spaces with desks that are used by different freelancers. We would ultimately like to have our own co-working space with desks to share, with a secretary, and with classroom spaces, a photocopier, etc. And this is something that we're looking seriously into at the moment. Ultimately, we aim to become a cooperative of associated workers. I mentioned before that we are a services cooperative at the moment. That's to say, an association of freelancers who share core services. But our ultimate objective really is to become a cooperative in which our members had contracts that covered at least 70% of their working week. And with that number, we would be able to transform the nature of the cooperative into a work cooperative. This we feel would offer far more stability to our members. If we do so, we'll be joining a kind of long tradition of work cooperatives. We might end up looking something like this, or perhaps even like this. Although I'm not too sure how good Alan and I would look in the skirt. But that's been our presentation, and thanks a lot for listening and your time. Obviously you can't ask any questions right now, but please use the comment section in the blog to ask any questions about anything you've seen, anything that wasn't clear or that you'd like further explanation of. Please get in touch.